The weather data meteorologists use to make their forecast comes from a vast amount of sources, ranging from buoys out in the ocean to balloons that float up through the troposphere. But there's one source that adds a more personal touch to it, and that's called a COOP site. The phrase COOP stands for Cooperative Observer Program and is run by the National Weather Service. The Walker Building here at Penn State is a member of the nearly 10,000 observers in the program, but how long has it been making observations?
Daily weather observations in State College, as far as I know, began in 1887. And William Freer, I think, took them. The Freer Building in the central part of campus, named after him. Charlie Hostler, there's lots of famous people that took the obs over the years. And then there's me for the past, several years.
Having to take multiple weather observations at multiple times during the day can be a very demanding task. In order to keep up with the demand, Bill Speir needs to find outside help.
My responsibility is to find students who can be here to take the observations, so I don't have to do it every day. And I just double check the quality, make sure there's no errors in the data, and just act as a sounding board for the student who took the observation to make sure we don't miss something.
Students have become an integral part of the COOP site. From sunrise to sunset, students will come to the Walker Building and record various weather variables. One such student, Laura Shedd, details what got her first interested and the process of becoming a student observer.
So it was actually something I'd heard about my freshman year here in one of my introductory meteorology classes. Our professor kind of mentioned it and was like, yeah, they hire upperclassmen usually to do this. It's really good experience, and you get firsthand experience with being able to take the weather observations that goes into the official records. And so when the opportunity arose at the end of my sophomore year, I decided to apply for it because I was looking for just a summer job, and I ended up getting it. And so I've been doing it now since last summer. So there's just a pretty short application. Bill, who's the one that is in charge of us and hires us, basically makes sure that we're competent and that we have some of the basic meteorology classes down, so that way we can kind of have a reasonable sense of why we're doing what we're doing. But then past that, once he hired us all for this summer, we had to go and for a few days leading up to the start of the summer, train with the current observers, because there's a lot of small moving pieces that go on. And so before he let us kind of go and do it on our own, we had to learn from the people that had been doing it at the time.
The team of hired students at the Walker Building share the responsibility of taking weather observations. Coming in at set times throughout the day, Laura explains the process of taking observations.
Yeah, so in regards to the observations, the primary job that we have is early on in the mornings. Typically during the summer months it's at 8 a.m., but when daylight savings time ends in October and November, we switch to having to take them at 7 a.m. So we're really getting up pretty early in the morning. But we'll go around mostly, and the two biggest things that people know the most about is we're going to go and we're going to take the temperatures as well as measure the amount of precipitation that fell the following day. What gets really fun sometimes is during the winter, if it snows, we have to go and melt all the snow. And sometimes it takes a long while because depending on the amount of water in the snow, or even sometimes if it compacts down, it becomes ice. You kind of have to sit there and just keep running hot water for who knows how long until it all melts down so that we can actually measure it. But on top of that, though, as well, we're usually taking current observations at that morning. So things like we're measuring the wet bulb temperature in order to calculate the dew point. We're measuring what the current temperatures are at the time. Any interesting weather observations such as visibility, any weather that's going on, as well as taking wind direction and what the current station pressure is.
After all the data is recorded, it is written down on an observation card. The cards will need to be approved by Bill Speir and will then be logged into the Pennsylvania Climatology Database and the National Weather Service's database. These observations will have an impact on the trends of central Pennsylvania's climate, but what impact does this experience have on the students?
Yeah, I definitely say that it's probably definitely been a very beneficial experience. It's helped me to learn some days to wake up pretty early, but it's also just given me firsthand practice at how to use some basic weather instrumentation that, depending on what I might end up going into, I might need in order to have a sense of how the past day's observations and the current observations that we're taking really like relate into what's going on. And it's also just really good as well to have a sense of like where general trends are, because we're constantly taking like even monthly totals, and even like last summer when we had the wettest summer on record, that record was marked by students. And so it's really just giving a lot of like firsthand experience at like some of the things that people don't necessarily think about, because oftentimes we think about meteorology and we think of the forecast and we think of the research, and not necessarily as much of like the day-to-day tasks that meteorologists have, even with something as simple as like, what did a thermometer measure as a high temperature the day before?
The workers here at the Penn State Co-op site are a very tight-knit group, but outside of the university, there are 697 other co-op stations across Pennsylvania alone, and thousands more in the country. Year-round, these co-op sites create a quality network for observing the weather. For Weather World, I'm Joe Speir.